All right, and we're back with another Secret of the Golden Flower, the Chinese Book of Life, translated by Richard Wilhelm and commentary by C.G Jung. We're on chapter 5, Mistakes During the Circulation of the Light, and here we have with us Daniel Borman again. Daniel, what's up, bro?
Enjoying a beautiful day, and excited to dive into the text again.
Cool. And it's a little bit shorter of a chapter, so maybe we should just talk about it a little bit before we get started. What were the impressions that popped up to you?
Well, something that we were just speaking to before the recording started was how this small chapter has a way of representing different blockages along the path. And I'm still grappling with how this makes sense in the context of my own practice and my own life. But one such example they use is this fox spirit that roams in a sense of folly in these high mountains, enjoying the pleasures of a ideal, perfect realm, only to find that it doesn't last, and back into the world of samsara or karma or turmoil as it's used in this book. So it made me reflect on how even if there is a pleasurable moment in meditation or in life, how by following it and letting it run its course, there is a beginning point and an ending point inherently within that experience. And inherently, because of that, there is implicit within that a sense that it's not the final goal, or that there's something beyond it even. And that's just one example they used amongst others. But that was one of the things that stuck out to me the most in this chapter.
Sure.
What about you?
Well, just to jump on that, I'm kind of curious as to what you think the coral trees and the jeweled grasses, these descriptions that are very I don't even know what to describe them as. They're very fantasy. They're very fantastic. What is this supposed to mean? What is this verbiage supposed to mean?
My guess is that it is a attempt at grasping the possibilities of dream states, and how dream states are a warp in time. And so when it describes coral trees and jeweled grass, these are somewhat of a convention that we understand, like trees and grass, but a coral tree is something that, the imagination can create, this fantastical Dr. Seuss oriented tree that is within a convention, but also shifted just slightly. And jeweled grass, maybe it means little droplets of water from dew that are on the grass that is creating a jeweled-like appearance, or it could actually mean a state of, or a different level of consciousness that this fox roams in, that could be symbolic of a state of consciousness that we ourselves can enter into. That could last thousands of years, hundreds of years, but at one point will end, somewhat like a fairy tale or a thing with a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Sure, that makes perfect sense to me. And it's also symbolically appropriate for me to hear the words fox among any other animal, because fox are known for being sly. And so it's almost like when you mentioned, going on a trip or something like that, and then all of a sudden you have these realizations and you see things in these mystical ways. And then when the trip goes down, that reality falls away as well. And it's almost like being a fox, where you're tricking yourself, or you're being sly in getting to that majestic state. whereas a meditative practice or what have you is designed to create a foundation that makes that a reality that is integrated into the real world.
Mhm. That makes
What's
sense.
Yeah. The question, the strange thing, they keep mentioning years as well, and being a certain amount of thousands of years or hundreds of years. And it's almost like, why do you think they bring up these numbers, these amounts that are sort of more than one lifetime for sure?
Hmm. It's a good question. The only thing that comes to mind is the concept of time is the ultimate keeper of reality. It, in the Vedic tradition, at least, it is before even Brahma, the creator god. So by mentioning time, there is always going to be an element of time in any state of consciousness that one achieves. And because of that, one is in one way is ensnared by time. There's no way of divorcing oneself from this concept, even if in a fantastical reality. But I think there is an opportunity also in a human life, this 120-year period, which is been created by the life of Krishna and the nakshatras, which are supposedly 120 years is the longevity of the original human, or at least in the time of the Vedas. And so the fact that it's more than one of those lives, maybe it's a hint at this possibility of, even if one achieves some state of consciousness through a desire, that in that particular area of let's call it it says heaven here, oneself in heaven at the worst among the fox spirits. So there may be this place, this heavenly abode, where someone can live for several human lives. But I think what it's also hinting at is there's this preciousness with being in a human life at the moment, and to make good use of it. So one does not get distracted by all these other possibilities or longings that could lead to these abodes that will eventually lead you right back into the place that you started, or at worst, not so much, maybe even a lesser birth, or a less, let's say, because everything's relative, right? In our birth right now, we think it might be, life can be pretty hard, but in my opinion, I think it could be a lot worse.
Sure.
So I think it might be hinting at that too, kind of a cautionary tale around do our meditation correctly or else, kind of narrative.
Right.
That's how I'm getting it.
Yeah. And then one final detail, it says in the footnote as to the explanation of the fox. According to Chinese folklore, foxes can also cultivate the elixir of life. And so it almost implies that they're able to cultivate this elixir to get you to these states, but they themselves, by nature, can't sustain it. They can have it and they can hold it for multiple lifetimes, so to speak. But it's as if the means by which they bring us to that beatitude comes with a desire that misses the point. Because the desire, like you said, eventually brings us back to being like, wait a minute, that desire is still not the ultimate desire. So yeah, I thought that was also the most interesting part of this chapter. Was there anything else in this chapter that you thought was interesting?
Well, yeah. The purpose of this section is to call attention to the wrong paths while meditating, so that one enters the space of energy instead of the cave of fantasy. And so in this way, I think it gets back to the whole juxtaposition between fixation and contemplation, and the circulation of energy, as opposed to entertaining the fantasies that can come from if I'm in this potential state of consciousness, I'll have even more energy, or my expression, my feeling could potentially be this other thing other than what I'm experiencing currently.
Mm.
And I think what it is really helping, or what it's trying to ingrain in people, is that the space of energy that you're cultivating in the present moment is the vehicle that needs to be cultivated over and over and over again, as opposed to any other fantastical fantasy desire based pulling that might have its own energy source with it. But if you follow it in that direction mentally, or even with your energy body, it over time will lead you astray, as opposed to the basic fundamental light of being, which is the cultivation of something that is your eternal light body, that is in itself the goal, the destination, as opposed to these other possibilities. So how does that tie in with the fox as the key to immortality? Well, maybe it's I don't know. Maybe it's when the fox is not necessarily wanting to escape into these heavenly abodes, but using that elixir in the moment to cultivate a sense of infinite possibility within the energy body, as opposed to the cave of fantasy.
Yeah, the idea of maybe transcending the animalistic nature and being able to unite with this more I guess the heavenly abode, I guess, is what they would describe it as. Cool. Well, let's get into the text then.
Okay.
Mistakes during the circulation of the light. Master Lu Tzu said, "Your work will gradually become concentrated and mature, but before you reach the condition in which you sit like a withered tree before a cliff, there are still many possibilities of error which I would like to bring to your special attention. These conditions are recognized only when they have been personally experienced. I shall enumerate them here. My school differs from the Buddhist yoga school in that it has confirmatory signs for each step of the way. First, I would like to speak of the mistakes and then of the confirmatory signs. When one begins to carry out in one's decision, care must be taken so that everything can proceed in a comfortable, relaxed manner. Too much must not be demanded on the heart. One must be careful that, quite automatically, heart and energy are coordinated. Only then can a state of quietness be attained. During this quiet state, the right conditions and the right space must be provided. One must not sit down and meditate in the midst of frivolous affairs. That is to say, the mind must be free of vain preoccupations. All entanglements must be put aside. One must be detached and independent. Nor must the thoughts be concentrated upon the right procedure. This danger arises if too much trouble is taken. I do not mean that no trouble is to be taken, but the correct way lies in keeping equal distance between being and not being. If one can attain purposelessness through purpose, then the thing has been grasped. Now one can let go oneself, detached and without confusion, in an independent way. Furthermore, one must not fall victim to the ensnaring world. The ensnaring world is where the 5 kinds of dark demons disport themselves. This is the case, for example, when after fixation, one has chiefly thoughts of dry wood and dead ashes, and few thoughts of the bright spring on the great earth. In this way, one sinks into the world of the dark. The energy is cold there, breathing is rough, and many images of coldness and decay present themselves. If one tarries there long, one enters the world of plants and stones. Nor must a man be led astray by the 10,000 ensnarements. This happens if, after the quiet state has begun, one after another, all sorts of ties suddenly appear. One wants to break through them and cannot. One follows them and feels as if relieved by this. This means the master has become the servant. If a man tarries in this stage long, he enters the world of illusory desires. At best, one finds oneself in heaven. At the worst, among the fox spirits. Such a fox spirit, it is true, may be able to roam in the famous mountains, enjoying the wind and the moon, the flowers and fruits, and taking his pleasure in coral trees and jeweled grasses. But after having done this for 300 to 500 years, or at most for a couple thousand years, his reward is over and he is born again into the world of turmoil. All of these are wrong paths. When a man knows the wrong paths, he can then inquire into the confirmatory signs. So that's the end of the reading. One of the things that just popped out again, reminding me, was in my highlighting, quite automatically, the heart and the energy are coordinated, and nor must thoughts be concentrated upon the right procedure. What does that mean to you? It seems like, they're constantly trying to sound strict and then throw a little in there to be like, but not too strict.
It's a very subtle thing. And whenever one is rigid with such a subtle thing, the subtlety could potentially go away. Something like that. There always needs to be a room for softness and ease,
right,
when direction is being taken.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And just to hop on top of that, the other note that I got here was, but the correct way lies in keeping equal distance between being and not being.
Right.
And this sort of also hints at not being too far one side or too far the other side. You're sort of suspended between trying hard and letting things just naturally happen. And it sort of reminded me of the questioning that we had of, how do I know if I'm doing this the right way or not?
The metaphor that's coming to mind right now is one that is a direct experience of mine, working as a Shakespearean actor. When you first get a script of a Shakespearean play with a text, for me at least, I didn't really know what it meant. So the first few steps were underlining words I had no idea what they were, phrases, figures of speech, which are not used much anymore, decoding a script. And then after the script is decoded, all the pieces are understood and everything is in its place, then beginning to speak it out loud and just getting familiar with the cadence and familiar with the sounds of the words. Then after that's familiar, starting to walk around and pretend as if you're on stage and doing some light blocking. And then once it's in your body a bit more, you don't need the script as much, then the intonations and the expressions can start to be associated with the words. And that stage takes a long time for the feeling, the frequency to enter into the text. The difficulty with that is when someone really tries to force themselves to act a certain way or to act and not necessarily be a certain way, that's classic bad acting. When there's this effort involved, and it's always a difficult thing to know how to take risks and to try new things out, and also not to overdo on a script. within a script format, at least. How this applies to this meditation is, in a way, that whenever there's a new meditation practice, there's all these difficult parts that are needing to be decoded a bit, analyzed, focused on, so that we understand all of the elemental parts. They need to be practiced and rehearsed. But at a certain point, once all the parts are there, there's no acting. It's just this beingness that comes. But the beingness can only really arrive in an authentic way when the constituent parts are fully understood. Then otherwise there is not full understanding. So they both work. And then to bring it back to the text, the script, when you get on stage, there needs to be no intermediary there that's telling you what to do or what to think. It needs to just flow right through you. Same thing with music, right? This flow needs to be there. Mm-hmm. This beingness needs to come through, but also this format of rigidity and practice and structure. And so they go together, it's the koan of opposites.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's almost as if the being side of things is getting the foundation for what the story's about, what the characters' motivations are, how you see the whole setting make the characters come alive in the story. And then once you know the being side of things, then you let it all go, and that's the performance, and sort of that's almost like the absence or the non-being that makes it alive. That's what we know. Life is a combination of being and non-being, because we can see, as you describe a classic bad acting, it's the actor starts to become wooden, and we're naturally designed to notice that stuff, because it's suspicious, really, is really what it comes out to be. And we know that when we see something that we're supposed to be suspicious about, and it doesn't, it's discordant with the setting that the story is trying to tell us, then we're like, that just takes us out of the story. I know, and again, I love that totally relates to a meditative practice. Never thought of it that way.
And then another question is, what creates theater is the performer and the audience. And there needs to be somebody that identifies, that's authentic, that is real. I will grace you with my applause or with my energy. And in the same way, potentially in meditation, maybe that's where the light comes from, where there's this authenticity that cannot be hidden. Like you can't fool this light. And then only then will you receive the energy when it's authentic. And the like you were saying, the work through beingness has been put in, and has been, all the details have been attended, or have been looked at with attentiveness, so that then the non-being state can be of a quality that represents a structure that is worthy of the energy that it may receive.
Exactly. Yeah. That's so cool. So let's see if there's anything else there. Oh, so do you have any idea what these 5 dark demons are that we can fall victim to in the ensnaring world?
Maybe to do with the senses. And maybe there's one associated with each sense gratification, similar to the 5 horses in the Bhagavad Gita, which represent the ego, which is the charioteer, and then the intellect, which is the reins, and then the senses, which is the steeds, the horses. The steeds, the senses are the horses. So maybe that, but yeah, I'm not really sure.
I would say the same thing. And through the dry wood and dead ashes, when we feel like after meditating we only notice a sense of depletion, as opposed to a sense of the bright green on the great earth, these meditations, these sensory things are again designed to have a naturalness to them. And I would imagine if you feel depleted after meditation, there's probably excessive rigidity, like there's an excess in effort. Because usually if there's not enough effort, you just fall asleep. So you're not going to feel tired. What do you think? Do you agree with that?
I do. Yeah, I think it's easy for the mind to develop things more interesting than meditation if one isn't really committing to it. And often the more interesting fantasies have some sort of sensorial component to it, where we're recalling a beautiful smell or a beautiful feeling of some kinds, maybe even a tasty food. And also there's subtler qualities of the senses too,
Right.
that could also be manifesting, not just like a desire for a physical taste or smell, but also, like smell, for instance, is related to earth and therefore could represent security or money issues or issues related to, our what's supporting us in life. And then taste is related to the water element and therefore could rule what makes us feel desire and how desire can manifest as fantasies as well. So there's potential 5 tracks, but the demon thing, yeah, the demon thing is, I mean, that I would like to know maybe some other translations for that word, because that word is becoming really charged.
Right.
I mean, some people believe there are literally demons that live in the astral, that if you think negative thoughts or you're taking on certain energies, then they're going to be more attracted to you, because like attracts like. That's one law of the universe. So potentially, if you're focusing on thoughts that are within a certain vein, then you're going to be attracting actual beings that are within that vein. And so it depends on one's interpretation of that word. If these things are all within us, or if there's actually something that exists outside of us that's actually controlling bigger systems, or that's influencing bigger systems, let's say, not controlling, but influencing. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I think the demon thing is something that would be equatable to Rakshasa, or perhaps even a Doitya or a Dasyu. So a Rakshasa is more a power-hungry entity that, from the Hindu perspective, is normally like a big, gnarly foot soldier who generally like a Uruk-hai from Lord of the Rings, like a really mean, badass warrior, but he's a bad guy. So power hungry through the senses. I like that imagery. You could think you get swept away with a desire, and boom, you lost your meditation. Advaita is more just a being that's addicted to conflict. So it's more of a general term. A dasyu is a robber of the treasure, and this is a Vedic term. These are dasyus are mentioned more than rakshasas in the Vedas, and they also really very much relate to the 5 senses. So when they penetrate these 5 senses, then we have these 5 demons that take us away into, or they rob us of our focus on the true treasure. And then of course, in this way, one sinks into the world of the dark. The energy is cold there, breathing is rough, and many images, cold and decay, present themselves. So another really interesting thing there that I've been noticing is the difficulty to soften the breath while maintaining a fluidity in the meditation. Because I have a bad habit where I'm just thinking, because of this book, I'm realizing if that's an important feature to a meditation, I have this habit of doing ujjayi breathing, the loud breathing. And so it tended to relax me when I would do that, or even just, I'm not sure if you can hear that on the microphone, but it's very loud. And so in practicing this type of meditation, I catch myself doing the sound, and it's a balance between saying I'm doing bad acting, or maybe this isn't the procedure, and just letting it be and maintaining just because really the goal is to have stability and peace and collectedness in the heart. And you can feel when you have it, because the light in the head, or the light that you're focusing on, is brightening with each heartbeat. And the heartbeat itself is starting to sympathize with the vision, and there's this sympathy that you can undoubtedly feel. But they're clearly pointing at something here, to have the breathing become sympathetic to the heart. And I may be looking at the symptoms instead of the process along the way. Do you get what I'm saying? Or do you have any similar problems like that with this technique?
Definitely. I notice, for me, interestingly, my breath can get, let's say that the quality of my breath can reduce, especially when I'm doing the silent meditation, not having a reminder, doing a verbal chanting, which helps keep a natural cadence, especially when I'm doing mantras that are specifically designed to be one breath, and then you say the mantra and then come in. So then when I'm not doing that, or just doing a silent meditation, I notice I don't have the problem with my breath getting loud, but it gets less nourishing in that I don't breathe enough. And I have the patterning of tightening, cleansing, almost getting rigid, trying to concentrate, and then losing touch with the openness and the ease, the taking up space. And so for me, it's similar in that I'm not able to regulate constantly with the breath in the way that I would like, but it's a little bit on the other end of the spectrum, where I feel my breath can get quiet and submissive and not give me what I'm hoping it will give me. But yeah, I just love the one of my favorite things about this technique is when I'm able to hold my eyes open and focus here. And then when I do eventually close my eyes, either to take a break or to take a rest, I just notice how the focus is just so present here and also here. And it just feels very good.
Right.
For people maybe listening, right between the eyes and, the quote unquote third eye region, but just right between the eyes, right between the eyebrows rather, and then also in the heart area. Mm-hmm. There's something to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I appreciate that. That's it's good to mention just verbally, because here and here it doesn't give you much of a reference if you're listening. So yeah. So when you mentioned your breath isn't giving you the thing that you want, what exactly did you mean by that? Like, did you mean it kind of was putting you to sleep, or?
I have an issue sometimes just breathing well, like a lot of people do. When the heart is disturbed, or when there's anxiety, or when there's just fear in general, the breath is usually the very first thing to go.
Yep.
And it's such a subtle phenomenon. And yeah, so what I'm saying is the quality of my meditation severely reduces when my breath severely reduces its
Right.
quality.
Sure.
And so, and for me, the patterning isn't a loud breath, but is in a reduction of breath capacity.
Oh, just like little sips.
Little sips, and just because I'm focusing on something or because I'm fixating on something that's other than the breath loses its prominent role in my focus, my awareness.
I see. I see.
And it's difficult for me to always reorient to it in a way where I am engaging with the quality of my breath.
Mm-hmm.
And it reminds me of the Vipassana technique in some ways, the Anapana technique, where you're only focusing on the entrance of your nostrils
Mm-hmm.
for the first 3 to 4 days of a Vipassana retreat. And yeah, it's a wonderful practice because there's no altering of the breath. There's no making it wrong. It's just a quiet observation of it, which over time creates this, it might sound cliche and cheesy, but you really realize that, you know, the Big Bang happened between 12 and 13 billion years ago. And the fact that there's air at all for us to breathe as these humanoid creatures on this planet is miraculous and amazing. And over time, the profundity of that truth becomes somehow just very joyful just through the breath, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The idea of the suspension that we talk about between being and non-being, I think gives us a really great window through the breath, finding that in the space between breaths, and it could be the space between breaths being like the middle of the exhale or the middle of the inhale, not necessarily the holding on the top or holding at the bottom, which that was what I used to focus on, trying to hold my breath. In which, you know, in some ways it has its benefits and it has its effects. But this is a technique that is very founded in relaxation and creating a habit of heart calmness or some sense of bringing the heart to its optimal place by feeding it the right amount of breath at the right consistency while focusing on just the space between the eyebrows. And as you say, this miracle of breathing has a way of opening a gate into an appreciation for it that we definitely tend to take for granted.
Yeah, it's very well said. Yeah, very well said.
And I agree.
Yeah, it's had a big impact on me. Just breathing into the heart. So simple.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to the diaphragm. I think there's all this pressure on, oh, diaphragm must expand and contract and expand and contract. And there's a lot of pressure for the body to handle and also feel relaxed. Because sometimes when the air goes deeper into the diaphragm, it can create this, like, I'm ready kind of energy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
that can feel subtly stimulating, while breathing more into the heart can feel just, you can get your needs met for oxygen. And there still is a slight expansion of the diaphragm there. But somehow the goal feels more, like you were saying, this calming of the heart is the goal, as opposed to I must get oxygen so that I'm breathing as a proper human should breathe, as opposed to this modern, you know, breathing style that a lot of us in the modern world have adopted because of the stress and lifestyle. Entertainment stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny how one of the things that it even mentions in here, you don't know, what does it say? You don't know until you do it the wrong way, basically, is what it says. Where is it? It's not super important, but yeah, it's this line. we don't purposelessness. Yeah, anyway, I can't find the line, but essentially what it says is we don't really know how to look for the right way until you find the wrong way. And I think through any meditational technique, you're gonna cultivate a certain amount of fruit from that. And as you grow into depth with it or amend it with other practices, each technique is going to have its own fruit, and there are going to be different things that we want to let go of. And especially when we're talking about mantra technique or something that is more rigorous of a practice, there are going to be dissonant objectives. With chanting and stuff, we really want the diaphragm to go out, and you want to be able to press, and it's just more rajasic in general by nature. And this beautiful technique, I think, is such a great juxtaposition to an overactive desire for some sort of meditation, in my experience at least, because of the meditations and the pujas and the yagyas and all the things that I've done over the years, decade. It's just a great way to remind me that there are so many ways to do things, and the more tools we have to use them, in some ways the better. But it also requires, with that extra know-withal, that there's an essence to it all. And this meditation technique is very stripped down, and it can be scarily stripped down, because all of a sudden all you have to deal with is your vision and listening to the heart and breathing. I feel naked sometimes, but isn't there something else? Isn't there something else I should be thinking about or chanting or doing or whatever?
Yeah. And this idea of the fantasies and where the fantasies can arrive from, and also some term that you define, or you said maybe on our last session, was this claustrophobia that one can develop if they're only breathing into the heart or only experiencing the breath in the heart. And I'm wondering, that in the commentary, it mentions the energy itself is the abode as opposed to the cave of fantasy. And although it can feel a little not boring, but restrictive or simplified and or claustrophobic, just being in the heart. But the alternative to that potentially is this fantastical realm, or a realm filled with the 5 demons of the sense pleasures. So it's just giving, the whole beingness a break from those influences for a time. And it seems that there's magic in that. And, that definitely seems that is the thread that weaves all spiritual traditions together, this magic point of full receptivity to the qualities that are mysterious, but are essentially the qualities of the light that we're doing our best to cultivate within us.
Right.
That needs a set of precepts in order to come. Yeah. And I think it can happen with chanting and more, like you said, rajasic type tendencies. But I would also like to think that those rajasic type tendencies are, they help the collective too. They're much more outward flowing in their energy, and they're really helping to move things out. Not to say that this peaceful abiding or this fixation contemplation doesn't do that, but perhaps it's a way that we as personal, or we ourselves recharge, or are totally embracing a sattvic point of view. this third point between tamas and rajas.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, it's for every circumstance, there's a different requirement. There's a different method, and I still love to do fire ceremonies and love to do the Rajasic stuff, and that that doesn't doing this doesn't take away from that. It's the I think it's also really humbling because sometimes I think I'm good at meditating, and then I do this meditation. It's like, wow, this is really hard, because there are moments, as we were describing, where the head and the heart complex become one thing, and it becomes a really wonderful meditation. But it's just really hard to maintain that that intensity, and then all of a sudden you fall back into, okay, just trying to focus on this, or, oh, I noticed my breath was getting rough or whatever. And the claustrophobia that you described, that we were discussing, is in some ways part of the surrender, part of this opening that with time creates the space for a greater amount of intensity that's able to be prolonged for a longer period of time and whatnot, which in the next chapter we'll talk about being the confirmation of right technique. But that'll be till next time. Are there any final thoughts that you have for today, or
No, I just have to thank you. This has been a really fun journey so far, and yeah, I've learned a lot, and it's fun to have these words throughout the week that I consider and remind myself of. And yeah, I hope it benefits other people too, but it's definitely benefiting me.
likewise? Yeah, and as long as it's benefit for us to just chew on this stuff, I'm totally content with that. And even if it's just between the two of us, but regardless, it's always nice to have you on, and let's do another one next week.
Sounds great.
All right, well, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.